All right, so are you ready to dive deep? Because today we're going way back, like through history and culture and maybe even a little mythology.
Sounds intriguing.
It is, and the best part is it all came from you, right? Because we're talking about the name Susan.
Oh, how fascinating. It's amazing how much meaning names hold when you really think about it.
I know, right? Like when you say Susan, what pops into your head?
I'm picturing someone I know, a friend maybe, or a favorite teacher.
Exactly. But now imagine that same Susan, but with ancient Hebrew texts and Greek goddesses in the background.
Okay, now that's an image I have to admit I wasn't expecting that. What's the connection there?
Well, it all starts with the name itself. Susan actually comes from the Hebrew Shoshana, meaning lily or rose.
Oh, wow, Shoshana. It's beautiful. And flowers, yeah, they just have this natural beauty, don't they? Grace, elegance, purity. It's no wonder the name's been around for so long.
And, that idea of purity, it seems to follow Susan throughout history, like it's a common thread. We even see it in ancient texts, like in the book of Daniel. There's a woman named Susanna who plays a pretty important role.
Really? I have to admit, I always thought of Susan as a pretty common name, but I had no idea it went back that far. What's Susanna's story?
Well, Susanna, she's falsely accused of adultery and ends up having to defend herself in a trial.
Oh, wow. That's intense.
It is. But even when things get tough, she stands her ground, and in the end, her integrity wins out.
Wow. So we're not just talking about a delicate flower here, are we? This Susanna sounds like a woman who knew her own mind and wasn't afraid to stand up for what she believed in.
Exactly. And that strength, that willingness to stand her ground, it shows up again and again with the name Susan across different cultures and throughout history.
But of course, like any good name with a long history, it's had its moments in the spotlight.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like I know Susans from every generation.
You're probably right. The name has had these peaks of popularity, particularly in the 18th and 19th centuries, especially in England and the United States. And then, get this, it had this big resurgence in the mid-20th century.
Wow, so all those baby boomers named Susan. That makes sense. A lot of my mom's friends are named Susan, so it's like the name captured this cultural moment.
Exactly. And you know what else is fascinating?
What's that?
This is just the tip of the iceberg. We've got this Hebrew, meaning this biblical story, but there's a whole other layer of symbolism tied to Susan.
Oh, I love where this is going. You're going to have to tell me more about that.
Well, remember how Shoshana means lily, and we talked about purity? Well, the lily itself has a whole symbolic history that goes way beyond just being a pretty flower.
Okay, now you've got my attention. Tell me everything. What's the deeper meaning behind the lily?
Well, in Greek mythology, the lily is closely associated with Hera, the queen of the gods.
Hera?
Wow.
We're talking about the queen bee herself, the goddess of marriage family. All things powerful and enduring.
You got it. And this connection to Hera, it adds a whole new dimension to the name Susan. It's not just about beauty or purity. Now it's about strength, about being a protector, a guiding force. Those queenly qualities.
Okay, so now things are starting to make sense. This whole image of Susan is changing right before my eyes. She's graceful like a lily, but with this underlying strength and maybe even a little bit of Hera's take charge attitude. This is blowing my mind.
And you know what? There's still so much more to uncover.
Wait, are you serious? I thought we were just getting started. What else is there?
We've only just scratched the surface. We still need to talk about Susan's global reach, and then there's the whole world of numerology and astrology connected to this name.
Okay, now you've really got me hooked. Let's dive in. I want to hear it all. So now we've got these powerful Susans maybe channeling their inner Hera, but it's not like every Susan is out there ruling a kingdom, right?
Not that I've heard of, but you're right. It's interesting how a name like Susan can be both strong and kind of adaptable,
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
It's not just one thing or the other. It can fit different personalities in different times.
Exactly. And speaking of different times and places, the name Susan, it's traveled all over the world.
Yeah, I remember reading about that in the research. It's not just some Western name, it's everywhere.
Right. You see variations of Susan in tons of languages.
Yeah.
In French, it's Suzanne, and in Italian, Susanna.
In Polish, Susan too, right?
Yep, Susanna.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, how did it spread like that? Was it trade routes, stories, people moving around? It's like this little connection between people across continents?
It really is. And get this, it even made its way to Japan.
No way. Seriously.
Yeah, sometimes it's just the sound translated, but other times they actually use characters that mean flower or lily to get at the heart of the name.
That's what I love about these deep dives.
Yeah.
You start with something familiar like the name Susan, and the next thing you know, you're on this crazy journey through history and culture.
And we're not even done yet. We still have to talk about numerology and astrology.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay, so numerology. to be honest with you. It always seemed kind of like magic to me.
I know what you mean.
Like, how can numbers tell you anything about a person? It just seems wild.
I get it. But it's a system that's been around for centuries. And a lot of people find it really insightful. So are you open to learning a little bit about it?
Of course, I'm always up for something new.
Yeah.
So tell me, what does numerology have to say about the name Susan?
Well, basically, every letter in a name is linked to a certain number.
Okay.
And then you add those numbers up until you get a single digit. And that single digit is supposed to have a special vibration or energy.
So it's like cracking a code.
Exactly. And for Susan, the code often adds up to the number 1.
Number 1 third. Interesting. Does that mean all Susans are going to be number 1 at everything they do?
Not exactly. But the number 1, it's often about leadership, being independent, and blazing your own trail.
Okay, so someone who's driven, ambitious, not afraid to go after what they want. You know, now that you mention it, the Susans, I know they do have this quiet confidence. They're not always the loudest in the room, but they definitely know what they're doing.
And that's the thing. It's not always about being loud. It's about that inner strength and that determination.
It's like they've got that Hera energy.
Right. Exactly. And you know, it's interesting. We see a similar theme when we look at astrology.
Really? Which astrological sign goes with Susan?
Well, it's often linked to Cancer.
Cancer. I wouldn't have guessed that. What's the connection?
So Cancers, they're known for being nurturing, empathetic, really intuitive.
Okay.
They're often called the caregivers of the zodiac, you know, the ones who make you feel safe and loved.
Oh, wow. And that fits perfectly with that whole Hera connection too, right? The protector, the one who cares for everyone.
Right. It all seems to tie together. Whether we're talking about mythology, numerology, or astrology, there are these common threads running through the name Susan, like strength and warmth and compassion.
It's amazing how well it all fits together. But let's face it, not every Susan is going to be exactly like this, right? I mean, we've got to talk about the real Susans out there, the ones who break the mold.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where things get really interesting when we see how this name plays out in real life, you know, beyond the angel stories and symbolism, because ultimately a name is just a starting point. It's up to each person to write their own story.
So true.
Yeah.
So let's talk about those stories. When you hear the name Susan, what color comes to mind?
That's a good one. I think I'd have to say a really pale blue. Almost white, like those lilies we were talking about.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking too. Like white for purity, new beginnings, and pale blue for calmness, peace. It's incredible how well those colors match the name.
Right. It's uncanny. But okay, enough about colors. Let's get to the real Susans. There are so many famous Susans out there, each one leaving their own mark on the world. Where should we start?
Okay, so let's play a game. You name a famous Susan, and I'll try to guess what makes her special.
All right, I like it. Okay, how about Susan Pevensey from the Chronicles of Narnia?
Ooh, Narnia. Okay, so we're talking brave, adventurous.
Yeah.
Probably good with a bow and arrow. Not afraid to take on a white witch.
That's her, our girl Susan Pevensey. She's got that inner strength for sure. But she's also practical, level-headed. The voice of reason among her siblings.
Which makes her a great contrast to, say, Susan Sarandon.
Oh, absolutely. Talk about two sides of the same coin.
Right. If Susan Pevensey is the steady captain, Susan Sarandon is a force of nature. She's played so many strong, complex women.
It really makes you think, how can one name fit so many different people? It shows you that a name doesn't define you. It's just a part of your story.
And speaking of stories, we can't forget about Susan B. Anthony. Talk about Susan, who embodied that strength and determination.
A true icon. The way she fought for women's suffrage, the way she inspired others, it's incredible.
She changed the world. It's funny how just hearing the name Susan brings up all these different images and ideas now. It's not just a name anymore. It's like this whole tapestry of history and mythology and real-life inspiration.
Yeah. It really is amazing when you think about it. We started with a flower, a word in Hebrew. And now we're talking about queens and biblical heroines and women who changed the course of history.
So listener name. If your name is Susan, or, a Susan, or maybe you just really love lilies, we hope this deep dive has given you a whole new perspective on this name. It might seem simple, but as we've discovered, it's anything but.
And for anyone listening who's feeling inspired to learn more about other names, just remember, every name has a story, a meaning, a history waiting to be uncovered.
So go out there, embrace your curiosity, see what hidden depths you can find in the names you thought you knew. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.